Hello everyone, this is my daily vlog, episode 26, and I'd like to talk today about how humans became so different, why we believe such different things from one another, and why they perpetuate our view of the world and what we want to believe, especially what we want to believe. If you believe in the Adam and Eve story, then you believe we came from a single source. Uh, uh, Two human beings at the dawn of time that made children that spread across the earth. Now, if you believe in evolution, it's also likely you believe in the same source theory that we originated basically in the area of Africa or around Africa. Basically, either North Africa or is that probably northeast of Africa, somewhere around there, Mesopotamia, Syria. And we continued to evolve there, and our society kind of grew in that area and then spread out. But how, given the idea that we came from a single source region. We're all from a certain region, whether it be from the Adam and Eve story or some other creationary story or evolution. We all came from a certain region. How did we disseminate and come to believe such different things, to come to such conflict after being separated for a long time, after these groups that migrated were separated for a long time? And the truth of the matter is that once groups separate, and they're separated for a long time, there's no communication. And communication between groups for thousands and thousands of years, if not more, was spotty at best. They were divided. They had no real understanding of how to reach other groups, or if those other groups existed, or the reason for communicating with other groups of people, of human beings. So they stayed in their separate, isolated territories. Basically, white people became whiter by being in the north, developing skin attuned to a colder climate and a climate less sunny, where UV rays penetrated to a very smaller degree than like somewhere like Africa or the Middle East or somewhere like that. And black people continued or got blacker. Their skin color got more melatonin and things like that. And and Asians, assuming that they came from Africa, or all people kind of disseminated from Africa, their skin got a different color as well. And their facial bone structure changed, just like with Africans and white people and everything like that. Now, what is very interesting about all the different groups of humans that I've studied is that we all have the same archetypes. It really shows how connected we are when we see the different forces that we understand being described in very similar ways. For instance, Uguferi, an African spirit that was kind of developed, but directly developed from the African traditions when the slaves were brought over to Haiti in the United States. Uguferi is a Vodou and Voodoo spirit, a warrior. And his connection, or his very symbolic relation to Tiwaz in the Asatru, Nordic, Viking, Northern European paganistic systems. Some people call themselves heathens nowadays, in opposition to Christianity. But there's very similar relation between Tiwaz and Uguferi. Tiwaz is basically rune, the symbol of his domain, of his influence. That is also a primordial spirit in and of itself, the rune Tewaz. I call the god Tyr, Tiwaz, but a lot of people call him Tyr, a lot of people call him Tyre, what have you. But it's an upward facing arrow, basically an arrow, just a traditional arrow facing upward. And that's the rune or symbol for Tiwaz as well. That's his rune, basically. And it represents order, it represents skillful warrior technique, it represents justice and proper order in a society, the coexistence of people, and the maintaining of that coexistence year after year after year. That's what Tiwaz represents. Uguferi also has Aviv, which is a symbolic representation, a materialistic representation of that spirit, of that Loa, in the Vodou and Voodoo traditions. And his symbol, his Viv, is basically like two arrows on top of each other with a line going up, and a lot of time there's a pyramid on the bottom. And then there's the, like you have a lot in Vodou and Voodoo, the 8-pointed star type design, where you have basically 8 points, and basically in voodoo and Vodou, that star is kind of placed around. It represents the duality and evenness and harmony of the world, and that is definitely at the top of Hugo Ferlai's two arrows, basically his Vive, his physical representation of that spirit, of that Loa. And their symbols are very similar. The arrows, of course, also the idea of order and harmony and strength and skillful warrior attitude and ability. Now, these two forces are just, the descriptions around them that are different are kind of like potpourri, kind of cultural potpourri that's placed around them. But these forces, Tiwaz and Hugo Ferlai, are basically the same force. They're just called different things, and they're just understood slightly differently because of the cultural differences in people that were separated or that migrated in different areas. And that's one example of how these forces have been identified by anthropomorphizing ourselves, our physical descriptions of what other people like us and we look like, onto these forces that exist in either nature or supernatural or metaphysical, whatever you want to call it. And for instance, Loa, which are African spirits basically, and Asatru, Aesir gods, which is Northern European gods basically. They all look like the people that believed in them first, that subscribed these certain traits to these different forces. They look like the people who did that for them. And that doesn't necessarily mean that these forces are those appearances. But when you get down to the ideology, the force, what these things represent, you see a similarity around the world of these different forces that basically people thought and worshipped animals and humans that look like them and ascribed what they worshipped to these certain forces, and so that they could relate to them better. But we see a similarity in human consciousness throughout history. Throughout history, we see people believed this, no matter what spirituality or religion they're in. They believed this at this time. They believed in this amount of violence or the possibilities of what God could do for them or against them at this certain time. For instance, during Moses, or around the time of Moses, when he was gathering his people and about to flee from Egypt, the idea that God could send down plagues, and the one God could send down plagues and hurt the people that were against him or against his people, that was something that, the idea of that was shared around the world, of what the gods could do. Like the Aztec jaguar gods, which we started understanding way later, I understand, but before that, the jaguar gods existed in some point, in some way. And basically you had to appease them, just like you had to appease the one God, Yahweh, in the Jewish and later to be Christian tradition in basically Egypt, and then north when they founded other civilized areas. But this continued consciousness, this continued overlap of consciousness exists throughout human history, and we start to understand truly who we are as humans by studying how we related to each other at different times, and how we still relate to each other, what we believe now, the similarities of what we believe now, how our consciousness operates in conjunction with other people's consciousness, despite being thousands of miles away from each other and not having a lot of contact with one another. Even the internet has made that much more simpler. But even people that aren't really connected, even if they look at different news stories, they use the internet for different things, we all kind of have a more nationalistic and political understanding at this time in the world, on Earth as humans. We have this nationalistic tendency to believe in our countries now rather than our gods, in essence. God does play a role, but it's more monotheistic God idea that's kind of strapped onto these nationalistic ideas that we kind of use in order to justify what we're doing, no matter what religion or nation you're in. Even if you're communist in your communist country, the idea of God is this union where everybody cooperates in the exact same way. And that can still be an idea of God. Even if it's an atheistic idea, it's still the head of a superstructure politically, the head of a superstructure ideologically, that which is the point of complete progress in existence. That can still be like a God for people who are purely political and don't believe in a supernatural metaphysical God. But that's where we're at right now. We are very nationalistic and very identified with our nations, and our nations are having problems with one another. We're less identified with gods and our specific traditions than we used to be. But, that still exists, obviously, with ISIS. Islam has been taken to a terrible extreme with ISIS, and in a very specific way that only parts of the Quran have anything that would even be close to justifying what ISIS does. Because I've read quite a bit of the Quran, and I've studied it a little bit. I basically know about Hinduism because I'm Hindu, but I know about all the other religions to a certain extent. Islam probably the least, but I have listened to audiobooks, read a lot of the Quran, and studied different aspects of it. But even ISIS, even this religious group who claims to be Muslim, who claims to want to make the entire world into a single caliphate that will survive forever and ever and then devote themselves to Allah, God, basically, even they seem more nationalistic than religious. And I'll explain. This seems very strange for me to say this, but I'll explain. They seem to be more interested in conquering other nations, other peoples, and making them conform to their beliefs, to making them conform to their power structure, their superstructure of ideology. And while I still consider them a religious group, or religious extremist, fundamentalist, the extreme of what religion can be seen as, it seems more that they're trying to found a nation and trying to gain power for themselves rather than power for their idea of God. Because of the taxes that they put against other people that believe different things, because of the murder of people instead of trying to convert people, because of the constant rape, which serves no purpose in the Quran, and basically just serves the purpose of satisfying the individuals in ISIS. This makes me believe that they're more like a nationalistic country that has been trying to gain power, and is like countries like France under Napoleon, or the Soviet Union under Stalin, or hell, even the England under the different kings in the 17th and 18th century specifically, nationalistic oriented more in those centuries and even before or after. But they seem more like a nation, and there's a lot of other religious groups that seem that way to me too now. And that's where we are. We're dealing with the idea of that we want our nation to be superior, but we don't know what that entails, and eventually we'll work past it and realize that, okay, this nation thing, it's not working. Just like we've begun to work past the idea that only our religion is superior. It's kind of come to the point where we only believe that our nations are superior. And we'll work past that, and then we'll start to really coalesce in humanity. We'll start to come together and realize that we can only progress with each other and not in spite of each other. And that's really what I want to see. That would be amazing. Now, getting back to my original point, we're all connected. We're all connected as human beings. Our consciousness spans millions of miles. And even at the beginning, the first thing that we did when we started migrating away is that we became different because we developed in different ways. But that doesn't mean we can't come back together like that original form of humanity that was in one spot, that evolved in that one spot, or if you believe in Adam and Eve, that was placed in that one spot and kind of developed in that one spot and then spread. Even if you believe in Adam and Eve or evolution, we can still go back to a point where we realize each other as human. That we're not separate, that in truth we only believe in separation because we want to believe in an idea that we think will make us dominant. And we have to get past that. That is what has made us so conflicting with one another and has driven us apart. And once we get past the point of being afraid of what other people believe, we'll progress as a one and basically only sentient race we know about on Earth and through the stars. We will progress and become fully developed as a sentient race once we get past this desire to kill each other and dominate each other. I'm looking forward to it. If you like this video, please give me a like. If you want to subscribe because you want to see more videos like this, do that, and I promise I'll make more videos. But thank you for watching, and try not to embrace the difference between one another. Try to embrace the similarity, the truth that we are all humans and that we all have the ability to love each other. Thank you very much for watching.